Hi, Mr. Chris. Welcome to Jeff's Podcast Academy. It's so great to have you here, and thank you so much for hopping on the show. So, please tell a bit about yourself, and how did you start your journey in this field of podcasting so far?
Hi, Jeffrey. Thank you for inviting me. I mean, I work for a company called Hindenburg Systems that makes tools for podcasters and radio and audiobook production, to be frank. So, very much focused around any audio narrative based productions. So, I mean, historically, I come from a background where I've done both radio and TV and computer games production as a producer and a journalist. And for many years, I actually worked in the computer games industry. And then I joined my co-founders here at Hindenburg in 2009, 10-ish,
Mhm.
where we were working on this software which was designed and dedicated for primarily at the time journalists, so that they could work and create audio narrative without having to have a sound engineer
Mm.
on their at their side. Historically, this was something where in radio production in particular, you always needed a full-time sound engineer to
Yeah.
record, and the journalists would focus on their content. Um, so I'm coming at this from a kind of technical
Mm.
software provider angle. I don't create any podcasts myself.
Mhm. Cool. So, is it initially like you created this software for like you mentioned journalists and stuff, or is it like anywhere you thought like podcasting space also come into this play? Also, is it like planned at first, or how does it?
Well, I mean, you've got to remember that in 2008, podcasting was extremely niche.
Yeah.
So at that time, there wasn't really a market or I mean, you could even argue there wasn't even a category of creator called a podcaster.
Mm.
There are a few, Adam Curry and so on, who created audio on demand products, but
Mm.
to talk about podcasters as a creative group, that didn't really become a category until 2015, maybe 14,
Mhm.
15. So uh, we started very much as a tool to liberate journalists from the technology.
Mm.
And I mean, the impetus for creating Hindenburg was, in fact, that my co-founder Nick Dunkley was in Zambia
Mm.
in 2007, 2008, and working for the Danish aid organization Danida to create a community radio station out in the country in an area where um, there's lots of community,
Mm.
there's lots of storytelling, but what there is not is a lot of computer literacy.
Mm.
And the challenge of finding a piece of software which would allow community members with maybe 2 or 3 years of schooling to create a radio community, tell each other stories, record them, broadcast them, was
Mm.
very challenging
Yeah.
because of the software that was around at the time was focused on, very much a full-time, highly
Mm.
educated sound engineer working with a journalist who has experience in the field.
Mhm.
And the idea of Hindenburg was to liberate those people from that technological chain, if you like,
Yeah.
and allow them to record and edit in an interface designed specifically for narrative, so that they could and an intuitive interface which allowed them to see the audio represented in a way that was understandable
Mm.
and work with it. Um,
Understood. Yeah.
we added lots of, or have, still have, obviously, lots of ways where we could automate, or we automate a lot of the sound engineering, because we know that we're talking about a product for narrative. We're talking about people are telling a story. Therefore, we know, intuitively, people want to speak at the same volume. You don't want one person shouting over the other person. So, levels is an incredibly important and difficult thing to get right for a lot of people. You want people to be able to move audio around easily. So, a lot of the editors that are around still today that are, designs usually primarily for music production, the concept of editing audio as you would in a text editor is not really built into the workflow. And so those are things that we addressed, and then lots of other tools that make it easy. So that's where we're coming from, and that's what we work with, is how to, I think currently it's become popular to call it democratize audio or storytelling. It sounds wonderful. I mean, just like I would say liberate audio storytellers from the technology. It's the same kind of approach.
Cool. So, I'm just curious, after hearing all this, after seeing the website for the first time, the one doubt which I already always had is like, how does this differentiate, from the other audio production software? So basically the interface and everything is kind of like little bit different than what I've seen so far. Mostly, this waves and audio forms that you see in other softwares is not like entirely the same as in the Hindenburg as well. So what do you say is like that differentiates, because you said that it removes the need for sound engineers, where people can't edit and do everything then and there by themselves. So what do you actually think is the main differentiation factor that sets apart from other editors so far?
Well, I mean, it is very much what I described, in the sense that the workflow design is designed for audio narrative. So that's a
Okay.
very intangible thing, design. How do you differentiate between one design and the other? Well, you sit in the car and you get in it and drive, and you'll just feel that the one car is easier to drive than the other. And Hindenburg is similar. It's designed with narrative in mind. So all the functionality, all the features that are available. So it's got it's focused on showing you and giving you access to features that are relative to what you're doing. Now, if you looked at a complex audio editor for music, for example, there's a lot of features that are absolutely of no use to you as as an audio narrator, and so they just clutter up your interface. They make it confusing because you have a feeling that you should know what that is, and it has no value. The other things are the automations, like auto leveling. I mean, auto leveling is a very underestimated feature. One of the most important ways of making a conversation open and two ways when you reproduce it in audio narrative is that you make sure that people speak equally loudly. A lot of people have a hard time listening to a podcast because the music comes in very loud, and then you have one speaker who's very soft and the other one who's very loud. And if you use the traditional peak meter way of measuring audio volume, you do not actually address the problem. So Hindenburg is based on the loudness, the leveling, the auto leveling system is based on a system called loudness. So loudness, which is a new way of measuring volume as we perceive it. It gets a little technical, but a peak meter just shows you what the loudest point at a particular time a piece of audio is. It doesn't tell you how loud our perception of the audio is. We use a system called loudness instead of the traditional peak meter
Hmm.
way of measuring volume. And what the big difference is that loudness measures volume over time, which is how we perceive or volume,
Yeah.
and that's why it's so much easier to get a balanced audio levels in Hindenburg, because you have loudness doing the measuring for you and then setting the levels. It's
Hmm.
non-destructive. You can change it afterwards, but what it means is that all the audio you bring in is automatically equally loud. So you're starting from a point where everybody is equally important.
Hmm.
Other things that differentiate us, again, because it's narrative-driven design, is
Hmm.
that you can move audio very simply around, and the automations that you've applied to an audio will follow that audio. So you can just grab a block and move it around. And if you try to compare that to how you would write in a text editor, very often when you write text, you write a piece and then you write some more, and then you realize, oh, actually, I want this part of the story to be somewhere else, or
Yeah.
I need to remove something fast and shorten it. Now that requires that you can move the audio around very, very easily,
Hmm.
and that's also difficult in a editor created for music production.
Cool.
and
Cool.
and this kind of carries on in our whole design of all the um, digital signal processing, like noise reduction and
Hmm.
EQ and so on. We have specialized DSP, which is particularly designed for narrative, but which would um, not necessarily be in a normal uh, editor, because it's not relevant for music production, which is the main focus of most other editors.
Got it. Got it. It's really interesting, and I can totally agree on the fact that the loudness that you mentioned, because I am kind of a big, I'm really an example of how we're doing that sort of thing. So, for example, sometimes I talk really fast, so I tend to just take it down slow, and when I take it down slow, it just the volume just reduces, and whenever I see it on my editor, I'm like, come on, man, how many times do I have to go and just do this again and again? So yeah, I guess that's a big like difference that you can make when it comes
Hmm.
to audio editing. I can totally take just agree to that.
Hmm.
So the one thing that you mentioned multiple times is that Hindenburg is mostly narrative oriented. So
Hmm.
I just want to get a little bit technical on your side. I mean, I may not be a big tech guy here,
Sure.
but I actually do a lot of I'm trying to release new newsletters and trying to bring people about the technical details of the audio editing. So
Hmm.
when it comes to the narrative podcast, a lot of people are asking me, like, they mostly start solo episodes. So when they're starting solo episodes, they want to make sure that they go on properly and all that stuff. So
Hmm.
what would be your advice? Let's just take this stuff as two separate parts. So first is, what would be your advice to give to the narrative podcasters or narrative storytellers, or even Audible or whatever it is, people who are actually hosting their books or anything, any sort of narration on,
Hmm.
um, how would you suggest them to take it process, like take it excuse me, like take it forward, like step by step, like for example, have a script like this, or talk like this, or just something that comes to your mind on how to take the narrative stuff comes on, if it makes sense, if I if I'm making sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, let's differentiate between podcasters and audiobook
Yeah.
narrators. That's two very different disciplines.
Yeah.
So, if you are a podcaster who is um, not having any guests, just a host speaking or telling a story, or um, uh, you know. So I know a lot of podcasts I listen to are simply storytellers who tell a story well.
Hmm.
Um, I think the important thing has to be preparation, preparation, preparation. It's. I think a lot of people underestimate how important it is to prepare and to practice before you start recording, and
Hmm.
how much effort that takes. I
Yeah.
mean, I would rather listen to a podcast that comes out every second week and know that I'm going to get a high quality production to listen to, than have one every week of a lower quality.
Mm.
So I think, if you're making a living, if you're a commercial podcaster and you have the resources and time to do everything professionally and staff and so on, well, then it's a lot easier to do a weekly podcast. But as an individual podcaster, it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to get a higher quality production. So, I mean, to my mind, focusing on quality rather than quantity is one of the probably the most important things. Um, and then there are lots of practical things that are important to do, but I'm not the person to provide all that information, because I don't do I'm not a podcast producer. I haven't been for 25 years or 30 years. So I think there are more qualified people than me to talk about that. But it's training things like breath and you were speaking about earlier that you have a tendency to have to slow yourself down,
Yeah.
but then keep the same volume. Um, these kind of things are things that you have to be conscious of, understand and aware of what you're doing. Listen to your own past podcast with a critical ear, or get someone to do it for you. Um, it's that kind of focus around quality that I always feel is important.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Awesome. So, just to follow up on that, so that's in case of podcasting. So, in case of
Mhm.
audiobooks, like you mentioned, you said that's a big difference to it. So, is it the
Yes.
same factors or is like different factors?
Well, I mean, in the case of audiobooks, it's similar factors.
Okay.
Um, the complexity of audiobook narration is that to um, you need to be consistent over a very long time.
Hmm.
So you need to a typical book will take maybe 50 to 100 hours to record,
Okay.
and over that time you have to have a consistent voice. You have to have prepared things like, do you want to give each character a separate voice, or are you going to have the same voice?
Hmm.
If you're going to give each character a voice, then you have to, for example, in Hindenburg's, we have a product called Narrator, which is specifically designed for audiobooks. There's a
Hmm.
clipboard function where you could pre-record a sample of each character's voice so that you have
Hmm.
that as a reference
Hmm.
before you record. Um, I don't want to keep plugging our products, but what we've focused on is making that process a lot easier and faster and more efficient, so you can focus on the actual delivery rather than the technology.
Hmm.
So in both our audiobook and our podcasting products, we have this auto level function. We have a special function for equalizing,
Hmm.
setting an EQ on your voice so that it sounds consistent throughout
Hmm.
a longer period, because many people don't realize, for example, when you get up in the morning, your voice has a certain timbre. In the afternoon, it has a different timbre.
Yeah.
And ideally, you want that to match, and ideally, you want it to be the same. But to keep that consistent over many days is very, very difficult. And so we have a feature which we call Voice Profiler, where you actually can take a snapshot of your ideal voice and then apply an EQ dynamically by analyzing each separate piece of audio and comparing it to your ideal, and it would set an EQ, you know, for that, rather than trying to do some sort of fixed EQ, which is not really a relevant solution. That's just an example. Um, Other things that, you know, microphone technique, breath technique,
Yeah.
those are still important factors in both the one and the other. Um, you know, Making lots of notes in what you're reading so that you can remember the complexities of the story and why you're reading. That's preparation that is invaluable in terms of creating a complete product. You know, if you just pick up a book and start reading, you're never going to make a good audiobook. You have to
Yeah.
have read the book maybe twice or three times. You have to have,
Mm.
made notes as you go. You have to prepare it, and a lot of these things you can do in Hindenburg. Um, make notes at different points in chapters and make a structure and so on. And then there's some practical, technical things that are important. Um, for example, if you are going to deliver an audiobook to Audible or Findaway or one of the other bigger distribution platforms, they have some very, very stringent technical requirements for volume levels
Mm.
and so on, and pause lengths and structure and so on, which are all built into the way you record in a Hindenburg audiobook
Mm.
narrator. Whereas if you used a normal audio editor, you would have to do all that on your own. So, for example, you would record each chapter, and you'd have to save that in a file structure that's consistent with the requirements and specifications.
Mhm.
Export it. It gets really difficult to manage the whole product if you don't have software that's holding your hand in that way. But again, it can be done. There's nothing you can do in Hindenburg that cannot be done in a competing product. It's a question of efficiency, ease of use, and how much you have to focus on the technical rather than um, the content. I think a lot of people misunderstand the fact that we make it easy for you to work doesn't mean that Hindenburg is not complex software. It's in fact more complex than most software because we're doing a lot of work for you
Yeah.
that you would normally have to manually be doing. We just make it easy for you to use.
It's like everything under the same roof, like sort of thing.
Yep.
Cool, cool. And one of the reasons why I was really interested in the narrative is because I interviewed an award-winning podcaster once. He's like a really big shot in the Spotify space and everything. And when I asked him, he mentioned that he does everything. Like for example, from start to finish, from editing and recording, everything. He's just that by himself. So when he was mentioning the whole process, I was like, I mean, yeah, and he also has a full-time job, and I was like, how a man can actually do everything.
Mm.
And it was extremely painful, and I think a lot of people had the resources and ideas, but still they got stuck at some point. So I think in Hindenburg that way can actually help them. So there's just one small doubt I have is that there are like a lot of products in the Hindenburg itself, like like Light, Pro, and Narrative, and we have talked about Narrative for mainly for people in storytelling space. What are these two other products that you have, like Light and Pro? Is it like for podcasters or
Yes.
any for
Yeah.
podcast
So
specifically?
Narrator is a product that's specifically made for audiobook
Mm.
narration and production.
Mm.
Hindenburg has a light and a pro version of its
Mm.
podcasting and radio production tools, which is called Hindenburg Light and Hindenburg Pro. Hindenburg Light is basically a very cheap, easy way to get started as a podcaster. And you can, it's a perpetual license, you can use it for life. Um, then and it has a lot of it has all the basic features you need to get started. The minute you want to start um, investing in your podcast seriously, then that's when you want to use Pro. It's really a question of which one. What is it a hobby where you don't want to invest a whole lot of money in equipment because you don't even know if you like the idea yet? Then you need to start with Light or even our
Mhm.
trial. We have a free trial. And Pro is when you start saying, okay, I actually want to make a reasonable quality product, and I
Mm.
have, I need noise reduction and so on.
Got it. Got it. So, just a couple of things before closing is that I'm when I saw the website, there was one image, where a girl actually brings a mic to that deer. Any particular reason why that cover image was made? Like any inspiring stuff that you guys did, or is it like just some random thought?
It's a question of telling a story, right? In that, when
Hmm.
you see that picture, then or that image, you look at and you think, there are so many questions that come to your mind. What
Hmm.
is going on? Why is this? And that's what we really want people to be doing, is to be focusing on the questions and telling the stories rather than the technology. So I think
Hmm.
it was our creative director Nick who put that together, and that was the focus of it. Is like, when you look at that, you think of stories and not technology, and
Yeah.
that's what we want you to do.
Yeah, because I've actually seen a lot of other products as well, and everywhere there was never like this natural stuff was there. Like a deer here, and it was never there. So, and your site is kind of like pretty simple, and I really love. I'm a guy who loves designs and different websites, and I really analyze and like what are they trying to mention, and this is like it was pretty different. It's kind of retro, and it's kind of pretty different. So it was really good. I really loved it. The moment I saw it.
Oh,
So.
good.
Yeah, that's why I want to
I'm happy to
mention.
hear it. We spent a lot of time on it, so that's good to know.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
So, is once again, thank you so much for hopping on the show. In case people want to find you, your products, or if they want to reach
Mhm.
out to you and they want to, get some details, is there any place that they could
Yep.
actually come on? So it would be great to,
Sure.
get to know them.
Absolutely. So our normal website is hindenburg.com, hindenburg.com. That's where you'll find all our products and a description. We've got loads of video tutorials. We do regular webinars and workshops online that you can join for free. In the academy department, you'll see, and that's also where we have our support, where you can ask any questions you have about how to use and what you need to learn. There's a 30-day trial as well, with which you can download from there. Um, apart from that, we have a Facebook community which you can join, um, and obviously a Facebook page, hindenburg.com slash what's it called? Facebook.hindenburgnews.com
Yeah,
it would be. And Twitter the same, twitter.hindenburgnews.com. Um, so there we're basically also available.
that's awesome to hear. So, guys, I definitely link everything in the description below, so you can definitely go and check it out. And Mr. Chris, is there anything else like you want to ask me? Like tables turned right now.
Yeah, I was kind of interested. I saw that at least, is it the seventh or eighth season you're putting your podcast out now?
Yeah, it kind of is. So then just to clarify, so I kind of recorded like 120 episodes so far, but it was like previously I recorded like around 50 episode was entirely different stuff regarding podcasting. So
Mhm.
some weird stuff like I'm in love. Why does love? Why does so real heartbreak stuff was there. That's the motivation how I started my podcasting journey. So that was
Mhm.
I was putting like that. Then I kind of archived those because all my listens was going there. I'm a podcast relating to podcasting. Why does every listen is going to I am in love episode? So yeah, I kind of archived those. So now I'm like around like 63 episodes in season 8. From season 3 to season 8, it's entirely related to podcasting, and 10 episodes
Mhm.
per season. So yeah.
Okay, well done. That's
Yeah.
pretty good going, very consistent. That requires a whole different level of commitment, which I'm really impressed by. The only
Thank
thing I have to get you to do is try doing the same thing in Hindenburg and see if you can sleep a few more hours a week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm actually going to create a solo podcast. So it's in my regional language, Tamil. So I'm from India. So I'm from South India. So I'm
Yeah.
actually planning to start a solo one. It's with a company. It's an original show. So one of the reasons when I came across, I really wanted to do this interview as like kind of like a personal advice, and also like for the audience as well. So yeah, I'll definitely explore it and see how this goes. Definitely.
Oh, that's interesting. Tamil Nadu is one of the areas in the world that I still want to visit.
Ah.
And I grew up in many places in the world. So,
Hmm.
amongst others, in Mauritius,
Okay.
where there's a quite significant Tamil
Yeah.
uh, population. And so I'm quite familiar with your culture and have had, friends from, obviously I went to school with them, Tamil friends. And so it's one of the areas where I've always thought I should go and actually visit. So maybe I'll come by and
Wow.
say hello.
Definitely. Wow, this is a big twist. I did not expect this.
I
Wow,
did not
yeah.
expect that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you ever step foot in Tamil Nadu, please just send me a text. I'll definitely come and receive you. That's for sure.
Sounds good. And then kind of off the podcast, you're more than welcome. I'd be more than happy to send you a 60-day trial and a discount code so you can try it out.
Sure,
Give
sure,
me
sure.
an idea of your feedback of using it.
Definitely. Wow, that's really nice.
Mhm.
Definitely. Wow, this is
Sure.
very tempting to, to do the full session, but yeah, that's awesome.
But on a whole different note,
Hmm.
also, I'd be actually very happy to set up a shortcut for you that you can send to your listeners
Yeah.
that they can use to access a longer trial and a discount code.
Yeah. Yeah.
Since you're talking about podcast production, it's very relevant, and your audience is very relevant. So after this, I'll send an email and team you up with my marketing manager who can create a link for you that you can put on your website and
Mm.
talk about as you like in your podcast. I would appreciate if you try it first and get a personal feeling if you like it,
Mhm.
so that you really feel that you can support it if you want to pass it on rather than do it as a favor.
Yeah.
I prefer people to have a genuine feeling that this is actually something of value when they talk about our product. But I believe quite strongly that you'll find that.
Oh, cool. And don't worry, I'm a brutally honest guy. I'm really straightforward. So I definitely
Good.
always send actually, perfect replies whenever I see a product. I've been using a lot of products online, Chrome extension, and I always keep in touch with those customer care guys saying that this is happening and this is happening. So yeah, I'll definitely
Good.
do
You're
that.
one of those attentive users. We like
Yeah.
them. As long as they're giving us constructive feedback, we're looking
Yeah.
to make constructive changes.
Of course, of course. Awesome. That's really great.